Hello. So voting in local elections is important. And it's important based on two crucial variables: that your vote in a local election, most likely, more often than not, is both relevant and effective, meaning that when you vote in a local election, it actually counts, because it turns out that it's quite difficult to fix a local election. The people who are in charge of the polls are likely people in your community that you personally know, or that you know someone who knows them. And so there is a degree of accountability in local elections that you don't get on the state or the federal level. And also, a good vote on the local level makes a positive difference for you, your loved ones, and your community, a tangible difference that affects you, that you can observe, that affects your day-to-day life. A bad vote does the opposite, and it teaches you a hard lesson, because your community is affected in that way as well. In local elections, you're influencing the realm that you actually can and should have a duty to influence, right? You can make a difference on the local level, and that's where most of our actual responsibility lies. You have a duty toward people around you, toward your community. When you do good, good happens. When you do bad, bad happens. You learn your lessons. The results are tangible, they're noticeable, and they actually make changes to your life. Okay. Now, jumping ahead to the national level, and we're going to use the same metrics of relevance and effectiveness to judge whether or not you should vote in national elections. By and large, more often than not, it's the opposite of local elections. National elections are actually pointless, because your vote is neither relevant nor effective. It's extremely easy to fix an election on that national scale, because there is no one-to-one accountability from person to person. There is no evidence that's tangible that exists on any official government website, in any document, that actually shows us how the Electoral College works and that it works. There is no step-by-step process that actually explains it, not only explains it, but shows it in detail that it works and how it works, or that it works how they say it works. I've read everything there is to read in government documents and on official.gov websites about the Electoral College, and these articles and statements are fundamentally without substance. It's all fluff. Okay. And who appoints the electors, and who they are most of the time, is also information that is not available to you as a citizen. So by and large, especially presidential elections, but probably all national elections, don't really matter. Your vote is not relevant, being that we don't actually live in a democracy. Politicians on the national level are not elected, they are selected. So your vote doesn't go to a relevant cause, and it's not effective. It doesn't do anything, right? Because your vote is most likely not being counted. And this is an important point, and this is where the substance of national elections actually lies. It's in your emotional reactions. It's in the emotional influence that it has over your psyche. Okay. Any emotional attachment that you have to one candidate or another is baseless and fruitless. Okay. Being that your vote doesn't count, and that you can't actually make a tangible difference anyway. And also, the politician that you're voting for is really just a talking head, a single face that exists solely in order for you to be able to have someone to blame in the case that things go wrong, when actually they don't have any tangible power to begin with. Okay. Efforts to gauge your emotional support through campaigning or otherwise is not necessarily to influence your vote, because your vote doesn't matter anyway, but to make you content with the result. That is, whom is selected. Okay, so it is purely for your emotional coddling that those efforts through campaigning to gauge your emotional support even exist. Okay, or made. Elections can be fixed without anyone having any ability to gather evidence to the contrary. So not only is there no one-on-one, not only is there no accountability like there is on the local level, it really is kind of a logically fallacious game that they're playing, right? That we're sort of taught in school that our elections matter and that we should vote in national elections and that they make a difference. And that all the evidence that we need to know that that's true has been given us to our education system and by our politicians on an election by election basis. And this kind of mind fucks us into thinking that anyone who says what I'm saying right now is some kind of like crazy conspiracy theorist, even though if you actually look into the documentation, there's no actual evidence that the process is the way that they taught us it works. Okay. So this is the burden of proof fallacy, that it's the error of reasoning in which someone is led to believe that things are a certain way, and that anyone who contradicts that is the one who has to prove that things are not in operation in that way, in that manner. Okay, so, but this is a fallacy, right? Because if you actually look into the evidence, into the government documentation about how the Electoral College works, how national elections work, there actually is none. These documents are without substance. It's just word salad to further instill you with the confidence that your education on this topic was valid. Okay, but it doesn't actually show you anything tangible. So local elections are important. National elections are pointless to vote in. What about state elections? State elections, I say, are risky. They basically give you the worst of both worlds between local and national elections, okay? Because they're easier to fix than local elections, but it's actually more difficult to have make a tangible difference on the state level when you do put in a good vote than it is to make a tangibly bad difference, actually. And also to hold people accountable for that. You're still further detached than you are on the local level from your state politicians. They're still kind of locked up in an ivory tower like they are on the national level. It's more difficult to actually have contact with them and to have your voice heard. All right. So kind of the worst of both worlds, a bad vote on the state level does affect you negatively. Okay. Yet a good vote only does so much tangible good. A good vote can have a good effect nonetheless. So I'm not saying you should not vote in state elections, but you should be very careful about it depending on the state that you're in and which way they lean. Okay. And what I mean by that is that we are in the middle of a political and socioeconomic paradigm shift where currency may be replaced, at least to some degree, by some kind of social credit score. Okay. And so in the case that you put in a good vote that's based on what's true and good, something that's for the good of the people, for the good of all, that good vote is actually going to count against you in the case that your state implements a sort of social credit score. In replace of currency and in order to gain resources. A good vote will count as bad credit in this regard. And it'll affect you negatively in the long term because you're not playing the bandwagon game of just kind of going with the flow of whatever is politically in fashion in your particular state, and also kind of on the socioeconomic level and the cultural level. Okay. So that's why voting in state elections is kind of risky, right? Because your vote is relevant and it is effective to a degree, much more so than national elections. In maybe national elections, it's not at all effective or relevant. But at least on the state election, you can make a difference. But by making a good difference, you might actually be shooting yourself in the foot in the case that social credit score replaces currency. How you vote is going to be a major factor that weighs into what kinds of goodies and resources you are allotted in the long run. Okay, so that's my spiel on how and if to vote on the various levels: local, state, and national. Have a good day. Cheers.